Joining the show today is one of us by way of 2 seasons, going on 3 now, as the beat writer for your Minnesota Vikings over at The Athletic, Alec Lewis. Thanks for jumping on with us, Alec.
Yeah, of course. I was talking before we came on. This heat reminds me of growing up in Alabama and the time I spent in Missouri going to college there. So, we're recording this on – I mean, it's a humid – it's unbelievable out there, sticky as it gets. But, it's also almost football weather. So, good to be with you guys. I'm excited about these next couple of weeks. It is a total uncertainty that this team is a total uncertainty, so it should be fun. It should be interesting.
I mean, that's pretty much the constant state of Minnesota sports in general. And at Minnesotans being as weird as we are, I'm sure you've kind of come to understand this. They wouldn't have any clue what I'm talking about except for the fact that it is State Fair week. So the day we're talking about is the steamy, disgusting first Monday of the State Fair. Everyone's going to go back like, oh, yeah, that day. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was out. So I went to the fair Saturday night, and I'd never really done the fair. I'd been out there before, but never enjoyed it, gone with friends, had a drink or 7, eaten a lot of the cookies and all that stuff out there. So Saturday was my first exposure to it. And then Monday, I was doing some radio out there today, the day we're recording this. And I think I walked. It felt like I walked from Calgary or something, which you guys are probably way more familiar than I am, just with how far I had to walk to get out there. But no, it was good. It was good. Any time to get out in the sun, given that we're going to be probably buried inside for months, I'm all for it.
That's the standard. And so you've been here a couple of years now, obviously adapted to a lot of the Minnesota, whatever you want to call it. I imagine you've at least seen in passing the Minnesota Wild logo, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, 100%. Green. Yep.
What is it?
Is it? What a good question. Is it an M? What is it? There hockey sticks on it or something? I don't know. You've got a jersey behind you. You don't even give me a free clue preview. No, I kind of like. I gotta say this. I didn't grow up with hockey. There you go. It's a wolf or something, I guess, and it's the Wild. There you go. Trees and stuff. This is embarrassing for me, but I'll say this, I was never a hockey guy. I didn't grow up with it, but ever since I've gotten here, I've wanted to read Joe and Russo and kind of just follow it with them. But the problem is it's so intricate and they're so detailed and so good that I've if I miss a few stories, I'm it's all over my head. We've got there's so much going on. Anyway, yeah, the Wild. That was mean, kind
of. Just imagine, Joe, at your next performance review, you're actually doing your job too well, too intricate, too detailed. Can't say who it came from, but a coworker complained.
With all the new systems we have about ratings, our stories, I'll take a thumbs up at this point. So it's great. As you can tell, Alec, our name of our podcast is Fellowship of the Rink. Stick tap to Lord of the Rings. We're both Lord of the Rings fans here, and we always ask our guests what's their biggest nerd itch is. If you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, maybe you're a Lord of the Rings fan, but if you have a book series, movie series, you collect stuff, anything that's kind of your nerd itch, this is my off the field kind of people might not be surprised about.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's not surprising because I'm a writer. I love reading and all kind of books and novels. So that's one of them, but I am a Star Wars guy. I grew up watching movies. I would play the video games. I've seen all of their breakout shows, The Mandalorian, all that stuff. That's the one thing where I think sometimes I try to put off this vibe of modern 27-year-old guy who goes out, but there are times where people are you like Star Wars that much? I'm yeah, it's freaking sick. It's very cool. It's very enjoyable. The characters are great. I thought you were going to ask me a Lord of the Rings trivia, and I'm thinking to go back to back with not knowing the Wild logo and then not knowing anything about Lord of the Rings, that would have been kind of embarrassing. So I appreciate you handling it the way you did. But no, Star Wars is kind of that's what I'd say.
Okay.
So we'll see how big of a Star Wars fan you are then, because my two things that, like, I've worked with a lot of nerds in my time, like working in tech, and the two things that are guaranteed to get them riled up are referring to it as Star Trek intentionally, or saying that episode 1 is the best movie in all of the trilogies.
Yeah, that's not true. Yeah, in Star Trek, yeah, it's ridiculous. But no, I'm not like no. I mean, I'm not. I mean, it's funny. It's a good question because like people like what they like. Like I've got friends who just you would never expect, and they're like the biggest like hobby box sports card collectors, and it's like where does that come from? I've got like it is. I like the question because it is. You never know. We all have the like right now. Like I go in phases sometimes with like TV shows, but like the new show on Apple, Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn, like I'm all in. And like I'm like refreshing for when it comes out on Tuesday. Like I get in these modes where I've got to break away from football, which I think about way too much. And yeah, Star Wars, The Mandalorian, all the shows can be one of them.
Yeah. And so tell me, how do you go from covering the Kansas City Royals to being on the Minnesota Vikings beat? It's just a very interesting career path.
Yeah, good question. The whole path is pretty interesting. I mean, or not. Maybe I think it's interesting because it's my path, and that's probably all human beings. We like our own stories.
Your parents care too. Your parents care too.
Yeah, no, they do. They do. No, I appreciate that. But no, I mean, I really had this dream for a long time of wanting to do sports writing. Grew up in Alabama, and I went to Mizzou for journalism. And my senior year, at the time, the Athletic, I mean, they were really hiring people to do everything all over the country in different roles. And I mean, I guess the best way to say it is like it was a lot. They had a lot of money and they could spend it however they wanted. So I was at Mizzou as a senior, and they hired me to write a story a week on Mizzou football. I was still in college. I don't really know how they found me. I think they just did that because they knew they could pay me very little and it would work, and my stories would fit whatever market they wanted. But then our Royals writer at the time is a guy, Rustin Dodd, who grew up in Kansas City, really good at his job. He was elevated into kind of a national role, and they needed a Royals writer. And they wouldn't tell me this, but I know the backstory. They offered it to this person. They declined. They offered it to this person. Declined. They offered it to someone else. Declined. So it's like, all right, we're swinging and missing here. Like, I mean, in a bad way. And they needed somebody, and I was close, and they had familiarity. So they ended up hiring me in March of my senior year, and I would commute on the weekends to start covering the Royals. And then once I graduated, I was full-time on the Royals. It was absurd. It was crazy. They got me for a very good price for them, is what I would say, which is probably saying too much, but that's the reality. And I was never a baseball guy, but I mean, the opportunity to cover professional sports right out of college was like an absolute no-brainer for the Athletic, which at the time had kind of started to become one of the preeminent, I think, spots to read about sports. And so it was great. I ended up, like I said, I was not a baseball guy, but I loved a lot of the advanced metrics. I loved the statistics. I loved the amount of access you had and how close you could get with the players. I was a glorified prospect writer, essentially, selling hope year after year, which didn't come until now this year. But ultimately, after 3 years, I was kind of like, I've always wanted to do football. I had immense respect for the people in this market, and Michael Russo and John Krasinski, and Aaron Gleeman and Dan Hayes and some of our national people. And so I kind of threw my name in the ring and was like, look, I'd love to cover the NFL. The editor said, are you sure you want to live in this climate? I said, no, I'm not sure at all, but I'll bite the bullet and do it because of the amount of respect I have for people. So, moved up here in 22, and a week before the season, didn't do any training camp. I remember my first day, the Darius Smith was hosting it was like a huge scrum next to his locker. He's talking about Aaron Rodgers. I had just been talking about baseball prospects. I was like, what the heck is going on? Yeah. And then that season was obviously crazy. They won 13 games. a lot of pinch myself moments, but it's been a blast. And like Joe knows this, but I mean, the respect that I have had from afar of the people that worked in this market for us has only accelerated since being here. John Krasinski goes to almost all the games. We've had some meetups and stuff, and it's been fun. And I mean, like I joked that in terms of following hockey at the beginning, but there is not, without question, a tag team of people covering a hockey team in this country better than what Russo and Joe are doing. And I'm not getting paid to say that. Fellowship of the Rink wasn't like bring me on to say that, but it's literally the reality. And I've seen them work, and it's kind of one of those motivating things every day. I mean, Joe is like, he'll have a feature on like 1 week and like where it's incredible access, and the next week he pops another one out. I'm like, how does this guy have the time to do all this stuff and spend his time and structure it? So anyway, it's been a very cool ride and being here and kind of working alongside these guys.
It's a great group, and it's part of why I moved from Florida too, or from Tampa, to move into this market. And as a hockey market, I mean, football is king in a lot of places, but hockey is just tremendous here. And I got to be along John Krasinski at covering the Timberwolves playoff run last year and see how he works, and obviously being up front with Mike and yourself. So yeah, I don't know if you had a welcome to Minnesota fan moment. Like I know for me it was like for hockey, if people recognizing you in like Duluth and stuff, but I don't know if the Vikings fan, like you're like, holy crap, people really care. The give a shit meter is really high here.
Well, I would say like a few weeks in, or no, actually 2 weeks into my first year, 2022, the Vikings had beaten the Packers in Kevin O'Connell's first game. Incredible performance. Really one of the best in Kevin O'Connell's time here. And then they go to Philadelphia. I think that was a Monday night game. And I remember Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were on the call, and they were giving up so many yards defensively, like just getting gashed defensively. And Troy Aikman was crushing Ed Donatel, the defensive coordinator, and it was a brutal game. Irv Smith drops a wide open touchdown on the sideline. This is a very visceral game for me. And I remember writing after, and the story afterward probably had like 300 something comments of people just going back and forth. They're bitching, they're upset. They've had so little success. They feel like their hopes have been dashed already. And I remember my mom calls me, and she still lives in Alabama, and she's not the biggest sports fan. She's like, why are these people in the comments so mad? I can't understand it. It's just sports. I'm like, Mom, you don't understand. These people really, really freaking care. And I mean, since then I've had run-ins with people, and it's cool to hear that they recognize or support or what have you. But I have like, I tell friends, it's like I see shirts around town of like disappointed Vikings fans, or like it's Minnesota sport. And I'm like, I want this to change. I don't know if the Wild needs to win the Stanley Cup. I don't know if the Twins need to go on a run. But like the negativity, I'm a pretty like upbeat, joyful, rosy guy, and so I'm ready for when Anthony Edwards does whatever he does and they win a championship. Not because I'm rooting for it, but because I just want people to be happy here. They should be. It's a good town.
If only, man. Yeah, since 91 for men's pro teams, since early 2000s, if we're going to include Gopher hockey. I have one of the shirts. It's the purple shirt with the yellow text, and the text just says, I drink because of my team.
It's brutal. Like, I feel for people.
It's brutal. But, I mean, talking about the comments, what's been more interesting of late for you? The comments from people looking for fantasy football tips, or how long Hockenson's going to be out, or the people that are coming in droves probably to defend Mo Ibrahim?
The funny thing is that they signed Mo Ibrahim, and like the engagement, his agent actually texted me with it, and I mean the engagement is like unbelievable. And on Twitter, I'm like, what? People love this guy. But I watched him play in college. He's a good player. No, the fantasy stuff is relentless, and it's not something I understood really before covering the NFL. Like, there is this entire. I've got a buddy who always says, like, there's a world with everything. There's a world with if you like watches, there's a whole world. If you're a biker, there's a whole world, and you only like your passions you get to know. But fantasy football, like I'm not breaking news here. It is like people are ravenous in terms of where they will go to find information. and I'm getting aggregated about saying Ty Chandler is going to get carries, and it's hilarious. It's relentless. Like, I grew up loving fantasy, but I've drifted from it just because I just don't have the time to allocate to read beat writers' reports of backup running backs. But yeah, people are relentless, and if that's why they consume, then more power to them.
Well, I don't think Sam Darnold was going to go like the top 6 quarterbacks taken in the fantasy draft, but he's a very important piece for the Minnesota Vikings season, as we now know. We probably would have bet anyways, even with McCarthy, even if he was healthy. But just what's reasonable to expect from Darnold this year in terms of, like, will there be as big of a drop-off people might think with Cousins not being here versus – obviously he never had this kind of weapons, I don't think, in his career to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the ultimate question of how this Viking season, like, where it ends up. I think it really it hinges so much on Sam Darnold's play. And, you know, I spent a lot of time this summer on a story that has not published yet about Sam Darnold's past and kind of the road that he's traveled to get to this point. And I think when you really peel the layers back and you listen to people talk about his entry into the NFL in New York with the Jets, and then his second opportunity in Carolina with the Panthers, and the dynamics that played a role in his up and down and a lot really down kind of entry into the NFL. You listen, and it's almost like, you know, we talk about these quarterbacks like they do it all themselves. Like it's either they're great, their team's great, or they're bad and the team's bad. And while the position has such a grand importance in the sport, no question about it, I think it's almost we never put enough into, like, well, if Sam Darnold plays well, it's probably in large part because the system is tailored to him correctly, the play calling is good, that he feels a belief from the coaching staff in the locker room, the skill players are healthy. Like, all of that stuff to me matters probably close to as much, if not more, than just the innate talent of a guy. And so I think it's part of why this is such a fascinating experiment. You're taking a guy who has been in those poor situations and you're giving him his best surroundings. Does that lead to more success? And ultimately, what does that look like? It's the number one most interesting question of this team. It's why I think even people nationally are, like, semi-interested in the Vikings to see how this plays out. And I don't think there's an obvious answer. Like, I will say, watching him practice every day, there's no question the arm talent and the athleticism is, like, unteachable stuff. And that's why you get drafted 3rd overall like he was in 2018. But the more you're around football, as you guys know, and probably hockey and every sport, it's like, well, what is the mental aptitude? What is the processing ability on the field, in the game, when you've got to make split decisions with stuff flying in front of you? Like, the more I cover sports, the more I think, like, that what mental skill set ability is just so paramount to guys who have success. And so I think if Sam Darnold, if the Vikings can put him in a situation where he can maximize that part of himself and not turn the football over, then they could probably exceed expectations. But I really think it's going to take all of that and all of those pieces kind of working in tandem.
What's your sense on just, like, the organization's feel for Sam Darnold, right? Like, is this a guy that, like, a lot of fans outside looking in might think, oh, they brought him in because that's an easy guy for JJ to supplant later in the season? Are they going to ride the entire season with him, or do you think that they're looking to see who else might be available out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan would be for him to start, and you're going to give him a runway, and there's not really going to be a short leash. And I mean, but that's plans, and you guys have heard the Tyson quote 7,000 million times, and the plan is only as good until you get punched in the mouth. And I mean, punch in the mouth in this circumstance, to me, is turning the football over. If he's fumbling, if he's throwing interceptions at a high clip, the way he has at times in the past, then it gets really tough. But the problem is, I mean, they don't really have a real reliable option behind him. Nick Mullins he's pretty much a career backup who has had success in spurts. Jaron Hall's a young guy who performed well in the preseason and showed some development, but I don't think you can have a crazy amount of optimism and what he could provide. From what I know, they've been a little bit in the backup quarterback market, and there's some interest there. But I think it has to really fit for them for them to really make a move like that to kind of fortify that room overall. So, I mean, I really think this is Sam Darnold's show. And again, it's why I go back to head coach Kevin O'Connell, who is the play caller, quarterbacks coach Josh McCown, the skill players, the offensive line, the system in general, like all of that, the running game, probably maybe even more than all the other stuff. Like all of that stuff has to be good so that when it goes bad, when there are the lows and kind of offsetting the highs, can they lean on that stuff to stabilize it and to keep Sam Darnold on a path where he is confident and where he does feel the belief? Like I sat down with Josh McCown last week, and Josh is the Vikings quarterbacks coach. He was a teammate of Sam's his rookie year in New York. And Josh is like, I believe in this guy. Like I watch him work every day. I see it. And it's great that for Sam to hear that, but it's also only as good as when you're standing in New York and that Giants crowd is bearing down on you. Can you make plays with everything flashing in front of you? That's it's something that you can believe as much as you want internally, but we'll see what happens.
Well, as you know, Alec, I went to the University of Michigan, the other U of M, as they say it in here in the Twin Cities. So I followed JJ McCarthy pretty closely in his career at Michigan, went to the title game in Houston when they won the championship. Read your terrific story on him early on. I think you talked to people from Michigan and some of the coaches there about his readiness. Like, what were some early impressions of him? Clearly, he's the guy going forward, potentially starting next year. But what were some early impressions from him that maybe might surprise some Vikings fans, where I think people assume that he was more of like a system guy in Michigan? They ran the ball so much, right? They ran the ball so much. He wasn't have to win the games with him. But like, what was your impression around him and expectations of him beyond after this year when he's healthy?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Like I've said it 3 times, but I'm from Alabama. So like my mind, when they drafted J.J. McCarthy, it went directly to the Rose Bowl game and to him ultimately like leading the drive that knocked off Alabama, which made me very sad, but it was impressive to watch him produce in that environment on that stage. And I mean, when they drafted him, it wasn't that surprising to me. He's a guy, having talked to a lot of different people, like who seemed to fit Kevin O'Connell's system. And then he comes in the spring, and it wasn't perfect. Like there were practices where the balls were errant. I try not to react to a lot of those daily practices, because I think the more you kind of react, the more that it can skew the narrative one way or another on just a minor data point, which is one day of practice. So I didn't really write a ton about it. I didn't really make much of it. I knew he was in the process of developing and changing some footwork, so that was probably impeding him. But it really wasn't perfect. And so he stayed over the summer, which not all guys do, and it's not something you have to do. That's not mandated. He chose to do that because, as we've come to find out, he's as committed as they come in terms of both the work that he puts in and how much he wants people internally to respect him and the way he goes about it. And then we show up to training camp, and from the get-go, I mean, it was like, man, this is like impressive. And it was, I mean, from just early on, the velocity on some of the passes, the accuracy to both sides, which people dinged him around the draft time about his ability to throw to the left. That was, I mean, it was not a problem at all. I mean, the aura kind of on the field, he would make an amazing throw and go celebrate and chest bump the tight end, and he was all over the place. So just, he seemed ahead of schedule. Talking to people internally, they said he was ahead of schedule, and who knows how it would have trended with the rest of training camp. I still think Sam Darnold would have started, and I think the Vikings wanted to take a long-term view from the get-go because he is still so young. But it was everything you want to see in a young quarterback: on the field, off the field, work ethic, disposition, maturity. Like it was the whole package, and that's why when Kevin O'Connell explained the news that he had undergone the full repair of his meniscus, that he'd gotten hurt, it's why Kevin was as outspoken as he was about, like, you guys as fans can feel comfortable that we have the future quarterback in this building. And I don't think he says that if he himself, a guy who knows quarterbacks at a level that I will never, doesn't feel as confident as he does about the direction. So it was a bummer, like the injury thing, just as someone who, I mean, again, like I talked about the positivity, the vibes, like it was cool to see that the way that people here had gravitated around him. And it was cool to watch a guy develop and people gravitate towards him the way they did. So to see him go down was brutal, but all great things take time. And so, I think that's where they're at in terms of the future. But I mean, nothing really crazy blew me away other than I went and spent a day with his family at his house in Chicago. And it was so normal. Like there weren't jerseys everywhere. There weren't pictures of him anywhere. We sat on the back porch of their house and there's like this kind of like the porch was not cleaned up even though a reporter was coming. It was just so like run-of-the-mill middle class, like a normal like mother and father just proud of their son, but also proud of their other kids. And so that was really more than anything throughout this time. Like that's what blew me away the most. Like I kind of imagine with a lot of these quarterbacks, the parents are helicopter. They're always on them. They're watching everything. The pride is on display at all times. And and while they are proud, just the normalcy that they kind of acted kind of blew me away. So if anything, that's kind of where my mind goes.
I know it's a quarterback-driven league, and quarterbacks drive a lot of the conversation, but they don't play every position. It's not the only thing that happens in the football field and determines success. Like, who are some under-the-radar players for the Vikings that can make or break whether this team is 500 or below or it makes a playoff run here?
Yeah, the two guys to me, offensively and defensively, that I don't even hesitate with are running back Aaron Jones and linebacker Ivan Pace Jr. And like fans, NFL fans know both of these guys. Aaron Jones has had years of success in Green Bay. He has torched the Vikings numerous times. He had two different 100-yard games in the playoffs last year for the Packers. But it's been very low-key this camp, how good he's looked, how athletic he looked, how motivated he looks. And so I just expect, given how much I think they're going to need to run the ball for Sam Darnold to have a lot of success, I just think it's going to be a great year for him. And then Ivan Pace Jr., the undrafted linebacker out of Cincinnati, who I still don't understand how he wasn't drafted given the college production that he had, was really good last year. He played a lot of games. He had a bunch of big plays, including an interception in Vegas that kind of won the game, sealed the game. But he just looks more confident, more comfortable, more physical, more explosive. And the way they're going to play defense this year, I think they're going to be more stunts and games on the front, which suits his skill set. So I just expect those two guys who, like we people know them, people know what they can do. I expect them to just have massive years as long as they stay healthy, which is the key in every regard in the NFL. But that's where my mind goes. And yeah.
And quarterback aside, what would you say are the biggest concerns entering the season?
Probably for me, I would start with the interior of the offensive line offensively, and then defensively. They've shored up the cornerback spot in a way by signing Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin at cornerback, but I'd say cornerback or interior of the defensive line and just the overall depth. So interior of the offensive line really, because again, I kind of just said it, but I think for Sam Darnold to be good this year, they're going to need to run the football well. And while Aaron Jones, I just raved about him, I think so much of running the football is not just scheme, it's not just running back, but it's obviously your blocking ability. And this interior is familiar guys. Center Garrett Bradbury, who had a solid year last year, I felt like. Right guard Ed Ingram, who still leaves a little to be desired. And then left guard Blake Brandel, who's a total question mark. Like that unit, if they can exceed expectations, then I think there's a reason to be thinking very positively about what might be possible offensively. Defensively, they want to play more man coverage. And playing more man coverage is kind of like playing man-to-man in basketball. you need good defenders to be able to do that. You need defenders on the outside to be able to cover, to be able to drape the receivers as they're running their routes. That requires cornerbacks. And like I said, they fortified it a little bit, but I'm a little also tentative in general about like the depth at every spot. Like if one player, and this is in every NFL building, I'm sure, but if one player goes down at so many positions, it's almost like a house of cards. Then you're relying on the backup and maybe the person behind them, and you really don't want to be relying on that much depth. So, we'll see how it plays out. But those are the spots that give me pause when I'm looking at this roster.
Like you was at the fair on Friday, actually, I did a K-Fan appearance with Russo, and we hosted a show. We had Dane Mizutani on there, good friend of ours, and asked him like the over-under for season for wins, if you had to pick the over-under. And he said, well, I think it's right now like 6 or 7 wins. I think is like the
6.5
like,
is the number.
Yeah, like where's your read? Is it like he's like just pump the over? Like I mean, no, that's optimism, run the muck. But like, where's your like expectations at? Like, what's your over/under on like the wins for the season?
Yeah, I'm probably around 7. I went through the schedule with a buddy of mine the other night, who's a big fan, and he was just asking like, "What do you think on a week-to-week basis?" And I mean, it's so funny because like all of these games come down to one score. Really, like I mean, 75% of the games seem to come down to one score, no matter who you're playing. The Bears have hype. The Lions are amazing. Like the 49ers, the Texans, Super Bowl favorites, like odds are the game probably will come down to around a touchdown, and then we'll see. I mean, I think you could sell me either way on pumping the over or being like, I don't know, 5-6 wins. I mean, really, like I just have a little hesitation with the potential for turnovers and then the overall depth, like I just said. Those kind of make me not as pessimistic. But I could easily flip that and say I think nationally people aren't talking enough about the defense, which is really well coached by Brian Flores, which has gotten better at almost every spot, which is more athletic, it's faster, it's more versatile. So there is reason to think like they anchor your team, and then if you can just get better run game and semi-consistent play from Sam Darnold, you can win 8 or 9 games. So I mean, I know I'm like being political and couching it one way on both sides, but it's just a total crapshoot to me. Like I just don't know. The schedule's hard too. So how does that factor in? Last year's defense was really good, but against a lot of pretty poor quarterbacks. So it's just so hard to peg. It's so uncertain, which is part of the excitement that I have and will have when I'm flying to New York next weekend.
Yeah. And you say no one's talking about the Vikings defense or Brian Flores. Tua Tagovailoa seems to have a lot to say.
Tua did have a lot to say. And that, I mean, it's very interesting. You know, I sat down last year, maybe towards the end of the year, maybe week 15, with Brian Flores in his office, and we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked a lot about coaching philosophies, about his development, growth. We talked about Tua, and I talked to other people who were in the Miami building, and you know, it's interesting. Like part of me, you know, with a lot of these former Belichick assistants, they seem to they adopt a lot of the style that they learn in New England, and that style is very harsh. It's very in your face. It's very it can be aggressive at times. And I go back and forth with them. Like in this day and age, from a coaching perspective, even in the NFL, which is as physical and smash mouth as it gets, you need to be more come alongside guys than attacking. But also, like if you were in the New England building and you saw the amount of success they had with that philosophy, you probably think that's the philosophy that can be successful. So there's a lot there. It's very interesting, and it gets to a broad, which was why I enjoyed doing the story on Flow. It's like it gets to broader themes of coaching philosophy, of the changing of times, of coaching quarterbacks, which is an entirely different beast in itself. So all that stuff, the Tua comments were very interesting, and the reaction and all of that was very interesting. But it's like it's in a different way. But with Sam Darnold, like part of his past, there have been times where he's been in buildings and he's like, they say I'm the starter, but they don't really believe in me. And I think we can all relate to that. Like in your job with your boss or the people that you look up to, it's like, do they really believe in me? Like you can kind of feel sometimes when there's like a crack in that. And so I think that applies and is very universal kind of to beyond the football field. So yeah, the comments were interesting, but it is a sign, I think, too, of just the changing of the times in terms of these coaching, these coaches in the NFL and their styles and what works nowadays that might not have worked years ago and vice versa.
Oh, we lost you, Joe.
Now you've been here the same amount of time I've been here, a couple of years. Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Top 3 places to get a beer in the Twin Cities.
Wow, that's good, Joe. That puts me on the spot. I'll go with 3 different kinds. So I live in the Northeast area, and so like there are nights where I'll just walk and get something. And I would say like some of my spots over here at like a Max Industrial or a Whitey Saloon. Like I'll hit one of those. So that's where I'll start. In the North Loop, this is going to make me sound pretentious, but it's also a place I love. The Hewing Rooftop, I think, is awesome. And they have a Tom's Lager there that I drink more than I probably should. So that's a spot. Let's see if I can get creative for the last one. I'm going to kind of cheat. San Jusan, the restaurant, is more of a food place it's more of a food place that I love. I don't really go there to drink, but I do enjoy drinking while I'm eating there. So those are kind of 3 different spots. But like I don't know. Like I could hit Graves. Free House is great. I've done Cowboy Jacks more than I probably should, and probably shouldn't say that on a podcast, but that's the reality. So yeah, it's the town. I didn't know the town had what it has when I got up here. I really didn't, and I've grown to kind of love it in a way that I don't know if I thought I would.
Love that. Well, we're going to put you on the spot one more time here.
Final question brought to you, as always, by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com. Throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order.
Whether or not you're a big golfer, we're still going to run with it. Give me 3 guys, dead or alive, athlete, celebrity, doesn't matter, that would round out your dream golf foursome.
Woo! Good one. No, I do like golf. I haven't played in a while because I don't know if you guys know, but the season is approaching, so I have not gotten out there as much as I would like. And I'm stalling for this answer for sure.
Nice.
3 people I would want to play golf with. Wow. This is tough. Let's see. I guess I'll pick an athlete, maybe like a musician and someone, and maybe like a sports writer, somebody I respect. Let's go John Mayer. He probably doesn't play golf, but I like playing golf. I would like to play golf with him and pick his brain about music. Athlete. Anthony Edwards would be hilarious. Yeah. And like, I mean, I don't know if he probably thinks he's good, but he's probably not. And then someone else. This is a weird threesome. Very weird threesome. Dane Mizutani, someone I know who would enjoy. Yeah, he could talk to John Mayer about Taylor Swift, whom they used to have a relationship with, and then we would all just enjoy Anthony Edwards. So that's the most random threesome that could ever be put together, and that's what I'll say.
Well, looking forward to have Dane on later in the season for him to pick you too. I'm sure he'll pick you. That's one of the great.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking nice guys who I would know. I know they're not going to be take it too seriously. It's Dane.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So you're like Bama, born and raised, does that mean that you? I don't know. I would have thought like a Nick Saban might sneak in there. Are you not a Bama guy? Are you going the other way?
No, I am a Bama guy, and I probably could have picked Nick Saban. And I really was feeling nervous on that answer. I'm not gonna lie. Like there was like this internal anxiety that I was like struggling with. But no, Saban would be up there. Yeah, if I were to, at the Athletic, sometimes we do 7 thoughts or power rankings or some of this stuff. If I were to do that, and Saban would be up there, no question about it. No question.
Well, for the record, Dane's fun to golf with. We went together a few times, and he's not extremely great, so you won't have to worry about that. But you probably golfed together right as it was. So I'm not good. I'm not great either. But
yeah, I'm not good. But sometimes I try to act like I'm good, but in reality, I know I'm not that good. But I do enjoy playing, and that's another thing in Minnesota. I didn't realize. I guess with Waggle here, it's pretty obvious. But I didn't like. When I moved here, I didn't realize golf was so big, and so that's been a cool deal.
Yeah, you just only get to play for like 2 or 3 months, but people love it.
Get it all in.
It's awesome. It's fun to be out there.
Well, we'll see if the Vikings are good or not so good this season pretty soon as they get the season rolling, and I'm sure fans will love to follow the coverage for Alec Lewis there at theathletic.com. A lot of good stuff, as he mentioned, some stories he's been working on that'll be probably coming out at the beginning of the season or during the season. So anyways, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure you want to plug your podcast too. I do have a podcast going on right now. Do you want to plug yours?
Yeah. Hosting a pod, got real creative with the name and did the Alec Lewis show. So real creative stuff on my end. But yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing over there. Just kind of messing around with it and enjoying it. So no, it's been good. But no, the stories that I've got for preseason and kind of into the season, pretty excited about. So it'll be a whirlwind as it always is with these seasons, but should be fun. And I wish I just gave you they sent us the script of the season the other day, but I didn't want to break that on this podcast.
Too early.
Goodell wouldn't have been happy. Yeah, Goodell would have been happy with me. So
and I think Joe's characterization of Dane is probably going to be perfect for the Vikings this year. Just not extremely great.
We shall see.
Oh no,
TBD. No, it was. Yeah, no, it will be fun. No, it was fun hopping on. Like I said, when the wild season is back up and going, I'll be trying to keep up with you guys, but failing because it's relentless. Relentless. You guys do a good job.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Same to you, and thanks for coming on. And we'll look forward to seeing and following you for either Vikings or fantasy football purposes. When you get going, so.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's it. 75% of my audience is
all selfish reasons. There's no reason other than selfish reasons. So appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. No, it's very human. No, thank you guys. Appreciate you having me.